Hello and welcome to another episode of The Legend of Nobunaga. Today we're going to be facing the Asakura army in the stage called the Echizen Offensive. A quick recap of what happened last time. We saw that the Shogun Yoshikage was getting angry at Nobunaga and had decided to call the Asakura army to attack him. So it's being presented vaguely as a defensive battle despite being called an offensive. Of course, historically it was an offensive, and I explained a little bit at the end of the last battle what the historical precedent for the war with the Asakura was, and maybe I'll talk about it a little bit more during the battle. So we can see I have to bring Nobunaga and Hideyoshi to this battle. It says at the top that the Asakura are making threatening movements. Ooh, better attack them. So the enemy commander is Yoshikage Asakura, a fairly well-established daimyo.
He must be defeated if we are to end the chaos. Begin your preparations. Sir!
So we're heading off. Nobunaga built up a huge army at Kyoto and headed off towards, well, not towards Echizen. It puts a very big focus on Echizen, but I'm not sure that's where the battles really took place.
About it. Still, I feel a little worried.
Are you frightened? Or perhaps you have other plans? Plans that involve Tatsuoki?
That's not it. I was merely...
Alright, stop it.
The Shino is really annoying.
Asakura is a daimyo and controls the land of Echizen. I must face him sooner or later.
My lord Nobunaga is a genius at battle! Beating Asakura will be easy! Child's play!
My lord, Azai and Asakura have formed an alliance. Shouldn't we at least let Lord Nagamasa know about this?
We do not tell him. It would just trouble him if we did. Nagamasa is bound by his alliance.
And word might get back to the Asakuras. There's no telling what kind of lies they'd think up.
No, don't worry about it. Nagamasa and I are family.
But lord...
So he has a lot of faith in his alliance with Nagamasa, holding up. The Nagamasa being the lord of the Azai clan, who is married to Nobunaga's sister, which is why he claims that they are family. But Azai has been in alliance with the Asakura clan for many generations, so they really have to pick sides in this conflict.
Let us begin. What say our scouts?
Our scouts have come back with the following reports.
Of course, Nobunaga has faith that Azai will come onto his side, because as the Fool of Owari, he has a lot of faith in friendship and intangible things like that.
We shall win by defeating the enemy commander, Yoshikage Asakura. Asakura has drawn up his unit in this area.
Just looking at the map, you know that something strange can happen in this stage. The enemy commander is right in front of us, so what's the rest of the stage about? We know something weird's gonna happen.
Lord Nobunaga, just you wait! I will outshine everyone else on the battlefield!
My lord, how shall we deploy for this battle?
So suspecting that the historical events of Azai rear-attacking Nobunaga's army would happen, I decided to go for as cavalry heavy force as I could. Well, not as I could, as I felt comfortable with. I wanted to bring a few infantry units for support, because I sort of wanted to use Mitsuhide because of his rifles, which proved pretty effective in the past battles. And I also wanted to bring out another ranged unit to use as support, because I felt I haven't used the ranged units enough yet. I was slightly wary bringing the lower level units. Like, I could have just brought the top row, would have been the highest way to get my stats up. But I decided to focus on historical generals. Like, I didn't want to take Amalia, for example, and I could have taken Toshie, but I felt like taking ranged units instead. So you can see I've given both units 2 things of cavalry and 1 ranged component. In Hideyoshi's case, it's rifles. In Nobunaga's case, it's bows. The conditions just tell me to protect the powerless civilians, which I guess I will, but can't really deliberately do that in this game. Oh yeah, I had to quickly change my equipment, which is why there was a little cut there. Did some cool equipment upgrades. I changed Nagahide to mounted bows to increase the speed of our retreat, and gave Nobunaga a better form of rifle troops. I think the rifle troops I won in the last level, in fact.
Understood. With this, we can all concentrate on fighting.
Our council is over. Blow the horns. We ride to war soon.
So off we go. Let's begin our campaign against the Asakura, and I'm sure that nothing could possibly go wrong.
Bad news, my lord! Lord Azai has betrayed us to the enemy!
Oh dear. Well, we all expected
the
it.
Azai army has already attacked Odani, and reports are that they're headed this way! Masa.
He's very exhausted.
Damn it all! At this rate, we will be caught between Azai and Asakura.
Well, if this is the end, then let's take out the Asakuras with us! Prepare to strike camp. We shall leave at once to return to Gifu.
But my lord!
We will retreat. There will come another day, I swear it.
That leaves the problem of a rear guard. Who will be the shield that lets the rest escape?
Lord Nobunaga, allow me to have that role. My Lord Nobunaga once saved my life. So now, allow me the privilege of returning the gift.
I don't know what it's referring to, that save the life thing. I'm not sure he did.
I'll be waiting for your return.
So Hideyoshi has been selected for the rearguard, well, rather he volunteered. So that's historical. Hideyoshi was part of the rearguard during Nobunaga's retreat, because he did indeed retreat at this stage. And here's Nobunaga's sister, the wife, sorry, of Nagamasa Azai. So she's in a little bit of a strange position as well.
Your brother attacked the Asakuras without consulting us. We have an alliance we must uphold. Forgive me, Ichi.
Sorry, yes, her husband is fighting
Right.
her
It's
brother.
not something you can forgive.
No, it's not your fault.
Ichi? You will forgive me? Then I have no regrets. I will fight. With a wife like you at my side, I will conquer the world!
Maybe. Oichi was supposedly a very dedicated wife, so it makes sense that she would support Nagamasa in this campaign, despite it being against her own brother, her own family.
Our objective is to safely withdraw from the area. We mustn't let the effort of Master Hideyoshi be in vain. We must escape.
So here's the new plan. We've got to get to that other section of the map, but we still start in the original location. So the objective of the level is going to be to work our way around this big crescent-shaped map. So the battle goes fairly smoothly to begin with. I just take out some enemy officers. So while this happens, this is a good opportunity to talk about the historical version of what happened around this time.
We must
Oh,
stop
here's Hideyoshi.
them! Come on! Today is our day for glory! Even if we fall, we will win! Now fight!
Not a bad speech. You can see I gave him Tadakatsu Honda's helmet just for fun. I'm struggling to target Nobunaga's charge. Anyway, so the real battle. Basically we had the Asakura clan, which pretty much has every reason in the world to hate the Oda clan. Oda had been very rude to the Asakura clan. I say Oda as in the clan in general rather than an individual. If you want to choose an individual, it was probably Nobunaga's father, Nobuhide, who really angered the Asakura by being very rude and
Anybody else want to give it a try?
like trying to dominate them diplomatically. So they had a little bit of beef because of that. The other thing they were sort of annoyed about was that they were one of the clans. The now Shogun Yoshiaki had asked to help him retake Kyoto. But of course they weren't strong enough to do it, and then they were sort of jealous that Nobunaga was strong enough to do it and had succeeded. So they were looking with envious eyes towards Kyoto. They wanted to be the clan that had restored the shogunate and get the associated
Just like I
glory.
planned it.
But unfortunately they couldn't do that. I do a lot of rampages in the early section of this stage because it gets your attack values up in terms of improving your health condition. So if you have excellent condition officers, they get a big attack bonus. So I did quite a few rampages. I actually forgot to do rampages with Kicho, which was one of the characters I needed to do with it the most, but I only remembered very close to the end when it wasn't really worth doing. But anyway, so we have a little bit of ill feelings between Asakura and Oda just before this time. And then, as I've explained in the last stage, or at the end of the last episode of Legend of Nobunaga, Nobunaga decided to attack the Asakura on the vague basis that he was defying the shogunate. But of course the truth was slightly more dark, because the shogun Yoshiaki was just beginning to start plotting against Nobunaga and was trying to form anti-Nobunaga alliances, which will only really come out after this battle, or after the Asakura war has run its course. It wasn't a very long war, it was less than a year, I believe.
Focus on your target and then
Much less than a year, maybe even like 6 months this war lasted. It was very short. Just before the events we're seeing here in the game, there were a few initial conflicts which the game doesn't show. For example, there's a castle, I think it was called Kanegesakai, something like that. It was a castle that Nobunaga very easily took. Like, he had a very successful initial campaign against the Asakura, which isn't mentioned in the game. It was actually taken by Hideyoshi. Hideyoshi led the attack and successfully captured it, and he was left in charge of the castle. And the reason that castle is important is, well, I may as well explain it. During the actual escape, when the Azai forces began to march to Nobunaga's rear flank, and he indeed decided he had to escape,
Something I wish to tell you.
but he didn't know where to go. But what happened was Ieyasu Tokugawa, his friendly ally, sent him some advice that he should go to Kyoto and try and hole up there, and meanwhile Tokugawa would try and come up behind Azai, and they'd crush the Azai forces between Kyoto and the Tokugawa forces, and then just hope somehow that the Asakura forces could be defeated in the midst of all this. So Nobunaga takes that advice and quick marches towards Kyoto, and he indeed leaves Hideyoshi. Oh, here's Asakura himself.
Suit you well.
Well, thank you, good sir. He indeed leaves Hideyoshi behind at this castle. What was it called again? Kanegesakai. He leaves Hideyoshi there as a rear guard with 3,000 troops to face off against the whole Asakura army, which would have been upwards of 10,000. So he is a little bit of a disadvantage. And Nobu himself is also in trouble as well, because he actually doesn't really have time to get to Kyoto at this stage. The Azai army was very near to Kyoto, and Nobunaga was really unlikely to get there before Azai did, so what he was probably walking into was a trap. So both Nobunaga and Hideyoshi are in really dire straits. But luckily they're both saved. They're both saved in different ways. So Nobunaga was saved by the incompetence of Azai, in fact. Basically because Azai was very cautious in his advance, and allowed Nobunaga to get to Kyoto way before he did and set up defences. So Azai missed his opportunity to capture Nobunaga. You can see here in the game we've defeated the Asakura leader, Asakura Yoshikage. So that's a good start. We've actually completed the objective he came here for, despite trying to retreat. You can see I gave Kicho Amelia's armor, and it looks pretty sweet. She also has a very cool Chinese-style polearm weapon. I think it's called the Guandu in this game. You may have also noticed that enemy reinforcements are rushing up from the south side of the map, and they're going to be coming out throughout the level. It's very annoying. This was actually a very intense level. I want to get to talking about what's happening in the game a little bit. You can see Nagahide almost died, but it's because there's a rifle unit just off screen which is firing in at our group of units. You see some shots hitting just there, which were really decimating me, so I had to do something about that post-haste. Now, where was I in the story? So Hideyoshi has 3,000 men in this castle, and the Asakura army is advancing. But Hideyoshi comes up with a plan to save himself. So it was Hideyoshi's own genius that got him out of this problem. So his plan was something fairly standard in melee military tactics. Well, military tactics before the age of like the Renaissance, etc. What they would do is cover their castle in lanterns and fires to give the illusion that it was more heavily garrisoned than it actually was. Basically because the Asakura army was arriving at dusk, and they could have assaulted the castle straight away upon their arrival, and Hideyoshi knew he couldn't let them do that, so he used this tactic to try and keep them at bay, and it worked. Yoshiaki Asakura was not a great military commander, and he fell for this ploy of believing that the castle would be more heavily garrisoned. He had some reason to do so because he didn't really know whether Nobunaga's main force had left or not, so seeing something that looked like a main force, he just assumed it was Nobunaga's main army and decided to camp and attack in the morning once he could prepare more fully for a siege battle. And this gave Hideyoshi his chance. So in the middle of the night, Hideyoshi strikes out of the castle with pretty much all of the troops and does a massive outflanking maneuver on the Asakura army, and attacks them whilst they're building their camp and basically routs them completely. When the army is sent back, Yoshiaki survives, Yoshikage, survives.
Not bad at all.
And Hideyoshi then basically falls back immediately after defeating them and lets the remnants of the Asakura army return to their own territory. So Hideyoshi starts heading back to Kyoto to link up with Nobunaga. So Hideyoshi has saved himself and performed a successful rearguard. Well, not just a successful rearguard, but a devastatingly successful rearguard, because he actually defeated and routed the enemy army with only a tiny force. So let's have a look at what's going on here on the level. You see I'm trying to start pushing Nobunaga off this beach section, but there's constant resistance from these generic lieutenant units. Meanwhile, more and more enemy units are still coming out from the south, and it was about this stage in the level that I realised there was going to be an infinite supply of enemy units coming from the south. So I just had to keep that in mind. So I'm still trying to push my way up this valley. Mitsuhide is being engaged by these enemy units back here, and he's really isolated on his own, so he's in a little bit of trouble. I decided to get Hideyoshi Hashiba to come back and act as a more distant rearguard, and to try and support Mitsuhide for a bit, because Mitsuhide is a pretty good officer. I considered using this sandstorm thing, but I didn't really know what it was. I didn't feel like using all three of my skill shots on something I wasn't sure was going to be effective in this situation. So instead I decided to just, I think I used heal eventually. I must have waited a second and then used heal on myself. I'm about to take some damage, I believe. Oh, I think that was it. There we go. You saw everyone get knocked down by that enemy spear charge attack. Mitsuhide is wearing Tatsuoki Saito's helmet at the moment. Pretty fetching. I don't think the colours go very well with the silver and red. At least I don't really like that colour scheme. The enemy yet again hits me with a spear charge attack. Oh, and everyone's sent to the ground. So I really need some help from the other guys. But Hideyoshi's here now. Hideyoshi has a permanent defense buff throughout this battle, which is exceedingly useful. Meanwhile, you can see on the left hand side that Nobunaga has taken a fair bit of damage up fighting in this valley, so I'm going to have to get back to him as soon as I can. Luckily these enemy units go down pretty easy, just got to finish them off. And there we have it. So now I need to bring Hideyoshi up to act as a rearguard slightly closer to Nobunaga in case I need to reinforce him. And unfortunately another enemy unit's already coming out from the south, we can just about see. So I had to turn Hideyoshi around to face him. Luckily it seemed to be pre-damaged, only had 2,000 men, which was about half its capacity for troops, so I'm not sure what was going on there. So this lieutenant goes down and my main force at the front is ready to advance after a little bit of healing.
Press the attack.
Not so bad. I think I might talk a little bit more about the story, just as we go along. I wanted to say that in the cutscenes beforehand, it was said that Nobunaga was retreating to Gifu, which of course isn't true, as I said, because he's going to Kyoto, and he actually stays at Kyoto for pretty much the entire Asakura War. So even at the end of the stage, when Nobunaga does get to Gifu after escaping from this level, that's going to be a historical inaccuracy. I guess I'll talk now about what happens after the battle historically. Oh, maybe not, because then this happened. We had Nagamasa Azai's force actually showed up on the battlefield. So this was a bit of an issue. So now Nobunaga was in trouble because he was going to be hunted down by these units and was already being ambushed by this lieutenant. So I needed to do something about the Azai forces, and I needed to do it fast. So you can see I already started pulling Hideyoshi back. It's going to take him a while to get there, and I didn't think to use his speed up ability because I was sort of panicking at the moment. So you can see Nagahide gets absolutely swamped. I've never seen anything like this. He has about, is it 4 or 5 units? Definitely 4 or 5 units attack Nagahide Niwa all at once, and he has horse archers, which are not very effective in melee. So he is in big trouble. This is sort of similar to the battle of Okehazama. Yeah, Okehazama, where I tried to use ranged units against overwhelming enemy odds, and they were completely decimated. So it inadvertently happened again. You can see I'm pretty much being attacked from every side. I'm turning around, trying to block from different directions, just arbitrarily trying to stop them. But no, Nagahide was unfortunately defeated. So now it's time for a slugfest, for want of a better term. All of my units, Nobunaga and Kicho at the moment, and Hideyoshi coming up behind, are going to pile in against all of the Azai units, and a couple of Asakura units that were hanging around and reinforcing both from the south and the west. You can see the enemy used a sword charge attack, but it very much missed. So this really is getting crazy. So when I got attacked from the rear as well, I thought I need to do something big. So I whipped up Wind
Show
Wall,
them
because
no
that's,
mercy.
after having seen it in the last stage, I thought this is pretty much the perfect move to use in this situation, because it attacks in all directions. So it's going to help me out against these guys who are flanking me from the rear and sides. Meanwhile, here's Hideyoshi, so it's time for him to do his thing. I charge him into the enemy's rear. And what I'm thinking now is I need to use Mitsuhide's X-Heal ability. You can see all of my units have taken a fair bit of damage, but Mitsuhide has an ability that can heal multiple units at once. So you can see I'm checking it out here, but I decide not to use it at first, because I want to catch as many units as I can in the range. And to do that I need to get Katsuie into the action somehow. So I decide to order him to charge forwards, decimating a lot of my own units in the way, or on the way, sorry, but at least it gets him in here. So now I can throw my X-Heal out, and everyone's going to start receiving massive troop bonuses. So this is going to very much increase the health of my army. So thank you, Mitsuhide. Very useful. Mitsuhide is a really good character, which is unfortunate because of what we'll see happening later in the game. Mitsuhide also has a really cool weapon called the Vermilion Spear at the moment. And when I used it in a rampage earlier, it was absolutely devastating. It has huge range, like it's a really long weapon. So you can just ride around on your horse, cutting people down from miles away. It was very effective. So now I'm starting to use some of my powers to try and level the conflict out.
How did you like that one?
The good thing about the powers is they leave the enemy confused for just a few seconds. This gives you a little bit of time to sort out what you're doing if you can just get the enemy on the floor for a bit. Plus it does do a little bit of damage, which is always useful. So you can see Nagamasa has 1,600 troops at the moment. And we're going to see what could be a glitch or could be a weird effect of the game, which is that when we go back to see him again, he is going to have mysteriously had all his troops restored to full. And I'm not sure how that happened. So it still hasn't happened. He's down to 1,500. But I assure you I'm not lying, that his troops are going to mysteriously restore. And I guess you could call it a glitch, but I think it's actually just to make this section of the level more difficult, is that he somehow is receiving reinforcements. There it happened. See, Nagamasa now has 4,781 troops somehow. So his troops just mysteriously restore every time his health goes down, which is pretty inconvenient. And I think I actually saw the same thing happen with one of the enemy officers near the beginning, so maybe this is just a new feature which the game has decided to whip out. The enemy officers actually have basically double or triple the amount of health they appear to have, because it keeps restoring itself. Luckily Kicho decides to give Nagamasa Azai a defense down, which is pretty cool, but Nagamasa Azai decides to retreat in the face of it.
The enemy is ridiculing us.
So now I've got the numerical advantage and I can start to really just whomp down on Nagamasa Azai. You can see he uses a cool attack. I think it's Firewall. You see there are balls of flames moving around his units and taking out my guys. I had Nobunaga waiting to charge. I had to charge through Kicho to get there, but I just sort of stopped. I think it's because I charged into his firewall. I wasn't allowed to charge through it, which is what I was hoping would happen, which is unfortunate. So now I just have to slug away at Nagamasa Azai, and now I will continue my escape. So while I do that, let's talk about some more history, just because I like to do so. Let's have a look at Asakura Yoshikage. He's already dead in this battle, or at least he's retreated.
The enemy at once.
She looks pretty good in Amalia's armor, don't you think? And with the weird helmet as well, it's a very fetishized look. But Nobunaga likes that sort of thing, so I'm sure it's fine. Or at least he might have. Nobunaga has an interesting personal life. I think he was sort of more bisexual than is usual in the time, but I'm going to talk about that when a character called Ranmaru Mori is introduced, because Nobunaga has a very strange relationship with Ranmaru Mori, and it gets into the it reveals some of the strange aspects of Japanese high culture, which are sort of similar to classical European high culture. I mean classical as in the classical period, like Roman, Greek times. So I was going to talk about Yoshikage. There isn't too much to say about him. He was a fairly good daimyo.
I have no regrets.
We saw Azai go down there. Yeah, he was a fairly good daimyo. He was very good diplomatically, was Yoshikage's main feat. He had a province which was next to Echizen. The game says it was in Echizen, but I think his province was actually next to Echizen to the west. And Echizen was under the control of something called the Iko Iki. Iki basically means rebellion, so it's, I guess you could call it the Iko Rebellion. Iko was like a religion or a sect. You can see here on the level, we found this secret path, which is going to ever so slightly expedite my retreat. So I decided to send Nobunaga down the secret path and send Hideyoshi and his group down the normal way just to look for enemy units just to take out whilst they wait.
Within our grasp.
So yeah, Yoshikage kept the peace with the Iko-Iki despite them being a very violent sect. Basically throughout the Asakura's reign of their province, Asakura had a very peaceful and stable province. It was very unique in the Sengoku Jidai era because it actually was very socially stable. It wasn't always at war, and it received very little damage due to conflict throughout the period. For that reason, it was actually like a refugee hub of sorts. Refugees from other provinces would often go to the Asakura lands to hide from the horrors of war happening pretty much everywhere else in Japan. It also became quite the cultural hub. They sort of based the main capital of the Asakura domain on Kyoto. I can't remember what the capital was called. It begins with I, as I recall. Oh yeah, I have to admit something. You might have remembered that many levels back I said I was going to look up what the hats that the Ashigaru soldiers wear, the little pointy hats that they wear. I was going to look up what they were called, and I promised that twice in this series of Legend of Nobunaga, and I still can't remember what it is. I have looked it up, but I always forget what it's actually called. I think it begins with J, but when I try and remember what it is, I just think of Jumanji, and I'm pretty sure it's not Jumanji, so I don't know what it's called. I do know one fun fact is that they were very often made of iron, even though they look like they're made of cardboard or something. They are proper helmets that you can use in battle. Especially if the Ashigaru were like a professional Ashigaru. Because one of the things that happened during this time period was a switch from Ashigaru, who were basically conscripted farmers who would fight for some of the year and then return to their homes at a certain point during the season to do harvests, etc., and help on their farms. There's a switch from that towards the professional Ashigaru soldier, who was a soldier permanently employed in the army, who would have slightly better equipment and far superior training and more experience, and wouldn't have to be worrying about their crops, etc., whilst they're out on campaign. So that's a more useful type of soldier, really. And Hideyoshi Hashiba was sort of a pioneer, that sort of thing, because he was an Ashigaru commander. Although at this point in history, he is actually not a true commander. You can see Tatsuoki Saito has made another reappearance, but I'm going to do very well at destroying him with Nobunaga and Kicho. We're going to take revenge for the death of Kicho's father, Saito Dosan, by doing cycle charges. Cycle charges are where you constantly charge enemy ranks with cavalry, and this is pretty much the closest thing you can do to it on Kessen 3. So I was just saying, Hideyoshi Hashiba isn't a true commander yet, because he hasn't ever been given command of a field army, which is the sign of a true commander. Basically every other one of Nobunaga's commanders has been allowed to lead large sections of the army in open battle, whereas Hideyoshi has only ever given command in special situations. So he's been given command of task forces and of siege forces, but he hasn't been given command in open battle. And actually during the Azai-Asakura War will be the first time that he does. I believe at the Battle of Anagawa, which I'm going to talk about a tiny bit at the end of this section, because it's actually going to be the next level on the Legend of Nobunaga is the Battle of Anagawa, so I won't say too much about that now.
Press the attack.
So you can see I appear to have completed the level. There is now nothing remaining. I moved Hideyoshi over here just to see if anything was following us. It didn't look like there was, so Nobunaga's going to make it to the exit zone. And there he is. Looks a bit tired actually, but we've made it.
Head for Gifu.
So in the game they decide to go to Gifu, even though that's a very difficult route to take, because you have to go through the Azai army. So I managed to defeat 28 officers and actually get a pretty good score. You can see my troops lost score was pretty abysmal, because I guess because of the death of Nagahide and the loss of heavy troops throughout the battle. I got an X-Heal Primer, which I'm very excited about, because X-Heal is that really cool move that Mitsuhide had for healing all of your units. So with the Primer, that will allow me to give it to a different general. So maybe I can give it to Nobunaga or something. That would be very useful. I also got this pot, which gives you extra experience, and this pot, which makes you better at using Matok troops. But as I have said before, I don't really like the Matok troops, so I don't think I'm ever going to use them. Loads of levels up this battle, and Kicho got a better heal skill, pretty good. So now we've actually finally completed Chapter 4. So we're going to see what happens. It's sort of strange because Chapter 4 ends in a very odd place. We've ended on a sort of crisis note. It's like a cliffhanger. So Chapter 5 is going to have to solve that for us.
With the betrayal of the Azai clan, the Oda army was forced to withdraw from Echizen. Nobunaga chose to pass through Ise at the Chigusa Pass, and then march on to Gifu.
Nagamasa Azai, why couldn't you master the chains that bind you?
I'm not sure what he means by that. And now we're being ambushed.
My lord!
Whoever said my lord there sounded like he was really forcing it. So it's time for chapter 5, and it's called The Beacon of Anigawa. Anigawa being the site of the battle that would end the Azai-Asakura War. So that's a pretty big hint as to what's going to happen in this chapter.
On the return from Echizen, Nobunaga was shot and wounded. It was
Not
a
sure if
better
that's
return
true at
to his
all.
home
It
of
almost
Gifu.
definitely isn't, since he didn't even go to Gifu, he went to Kyoto.
Using their momentum, the combined forces of Azai and Asakura moved to the attack. The Oda forces were at the brink of destruction.
I guess that's true. Oda was in trouble at this stage. Especially just before the events we just saw, they were more in trouble. They're a little bit less in trouble now. Historically, they were very much in trouble because most of their army was in Kyoto, whilst their base and supply lines were from Gifu, and they were being cut off by the Azai. So having their forces split like that really was an issue for them, but in the game all their forces have been compiled at Gifu, so they don't have that disadvantage, they're just being attacked a lot. And Nobunaga's been shot, of course, which we can't forget. It's sort of strange because being shot with a musket or an arquebus would instantly kill you regardless of where it hit you, because the balls were so large that the shock of it hitting your body would break every bone and you just die instantly.
And the Azai-Asakura forces show signs of an attack.
Perhaps his armor protected him in this case. We could make that argument.
Regardless of the condition of our lord, we have to do something immediately. Master Hashiba should go and see what his lordship is planning.
I like how it's raining to represent how depressed everyone
Lord
is.
Shibata can take 500 troops and delay the sects. Lord Mori and I will prepare for the battle of Gifu.
Just when did we start taking orders from you?
The sects he mentioned was a group of rebels that rose up around this time. Of religious rebels.
Aren't you? Rank, position, face. Where will those things get us now?
I don't believe Nobunaga bothered dealing with them
until
after the Asakura War.
Shibata, are you saying that you have a plan that will save us?
You dare? You have the nerve to say that?
Mr. Hide's really sort of got out of order.
We will not fight at Gifu. We move out to attack Azai and Asakura.
My lord! You're not well.
A flesh wound.
It's just a flesh
Yoshinari,
wound.
Send to Ieyasu for aid.
My lord!
Katsuie, Mitsuhide, fortify southern Oumi.
My lord!
Monkey, Toshie, attack Yokoyama Castle. Draw Azai back out of Odani.
My lord!
So there's the plan. So there were some minor attacks on castles that happened around this time in history, which the game doesn't show, but it alludes to them just there as happening. And now we've jumped forward in time without any indication, because now we're in the eve of the Battle of Anigawa, which takes place slightly later in the year.
My lord, there is one here who wishes to enter your service.
How about that? We've got a new officer. He's got like fish fins on his helmet.
Fukushima is my name. I desire fame in battle. My spear is yours.
Excellent. I look forward to witnessing your ability on the field of battle.
Lord.
The chance of me using him is fairly slim. But who knows?
My lord, this is the current situation.
So we're heading into the strategy map for Chapter 5 to have a look at what sort of levels it's going to present us with. Oh, there's the officer we just got, Matsunori Fukushima. So basically the decisive battle of Anigawa is available right away, so we can go and finish this chapter, well, right off the bat if we want. But there's a little minor battle down at the bottom, as well as, oh, there's some good stuff in the shop there actually. And there's this thing with the Tauri brigands, so I'll probably do that at some point. So the Battle of Anigawa was the historic end of the Asakura-Azai War, so I'm guessing that will be the end of this chapter too. So as I mentioned, the game has skipped over a couple of minor battles that happened between Nobunaga and the Asakura-Azai. Basically, there were some attempts to capture various castles by Nobunaga that met with only mediocre success. It didn't really work. It took like a few months. So Nobunaga's still in Kyoto historically. He's trying to take various castles. He's using diplomacy. This was Hideyoshi, again, advising him, was telling him that he needed to use diplomacy to try and get all of the minor barons on the border between Omi and Mino, which is vaguely between Kyoto and Gifu, somewhere in the middle, where the Azai army was, that he's to try and persuade them to join his side. So he was working on doing this and trying to capture a few minor castles of the Azai, whilst the Azai army was wandering around, well, not really doing much. Basically, the Azai army was waiting to be reinforced by Asakura before it began its attack on the newly consolidated forces of Nobunaga at Kyoto. And eventually, all these minor sieges which Nobunaga starts don't really go anywhere, and the Asakura army reorganizes, gets new troops, and shows up to support the Azai. So now Nobunaga's in trouble. This time the Asakura army didn't go for a pincer attack. It could have still used the Azai army to pincer Kyoto, but instead it decided to directly support the Azai army by coming up behind them. And the Azai army actually fell back slightly to the north, allowing Nobunaga to leave Kyoto and march east in the vague direction of Gifu, and they would meet the Asakura-Azai combined force at this river called Anegawa. And of course, if you know anything about the Battle of Anegawa, Nobunaga's role is very much suppressed in relation to Ieyasu Tokugawa's role, because the Tokugawa army had at this point arrived to finally reinforce Oda's beleaguered forces. But of course, that's all something to talk about next time, because I'm sure the game will bring Ieyasu Tokugawa into it, and we'll see how much it relies on him and whether it portrays Nobunaga as the hero or whether it portrays Ieyasu as the hero. Ieyasu was the hero, but the game does have a tendency of making Nobunaga seem cooler than he actually is. But we'll see that next time on The Legend of Nobunaga, so until then I wish you a very good day. Keep on rockin'.